Yes, really looking forward to this talk from Kat. As you can tell, we're going to be hearing all about bridging the platform empathy gap and applying product management to platform engineering. There's a whole host of people in this room who will know that I'm completely fanatical about this topic, and a bunch of people who are sick of me talking about platform product management, what that might look like, what that might mean. So I'm going to hand over to Kat to enlighten everyone in the room and hopefully convert more people to drink the Kool-Aid with me about product management and platforms. So looking forward to it.
No pressure to try and convert a room full of people to platform product management, but hopefully, given the topic, you're all bought in already. So, a few months ago now, I went to a conference called DevOps Days London. This is me and my team. It was my first DevOps platform engineering meetup conference thing that I've been to. So I've done to a lot of product management ones and general tech ones, but this was the first one where I actually got to speak to practitioners of DevOps and platform engineering on the ground who weren't in my team. It was really good. It's on next year. I recommend you go. Great fun. And it is at the beginning of the day, the first morning is pretty much the same as any other conference you've ever been to. So they have talks, they tell you to do the Pac-Man, which is where you talk with a gap in the way so someone can join in. All about sort of the socio-technical bits around platforms as well. So it's not just the tech stuff. Really, really interesting. But the most exciting thing for me is the afternoons. So in the afternoons, they have this topic called open spaces, where you as people who attend the conference can do whatever you want in terms of things to talk about. So people put forward on sticky notes or present themselves and say, I would like to talk about this. This is a topic I'm interested in. And then the whole room goes, yes, we agree. We want to talk about this or not. And if you get your topic through, you get put on a board with about 8 other things. And people are just set free to a room to talk for an hour about that topic. Really, really interesting, really like novel, I thought. And one of the topics, lucky me, was about what platform engineering was, best practices, what it meant. And I am like 3 months into a new role where I am now a product manager of a platform product rather than a platform product manager. So I was like, great, learn about users, brilliant, let's do it. And too fast. It was a small room. There were like 50 people. I was sat on the floor because we'd run out of chairs, and everyone started talking, and I was like, yes, that's good. I ended up looking like this because I thought everyone was going to be really excited, enthusiastic. We love platforms, yay. But no, instead they were saying things like this. Things were good before we started scaling. The devs now have no idea what they're doing. Developers need clear guardrails, otherwise they break things. They just ignore the platform and do whatever they want, whenever they want. And I have to help our developers with everything. It's so tiring. And each of these things that the practitioners were saying in the room, I was like, oh, that sucks. Oh, that sucks. Oh. And each one was more and more frustrated and annoyed. And you could feel in their voices that it wasn't anger or irritation. It was just, this isn't working. And how do I make it work? And I could tell there were sort of 2 camps of what they felt like their users were. There was the camp that was the cowboys who did whatever they want, whenever they want, don't really care. I don't give a damn about governance. And then there was the other camp, which were toddlers who had no idea what they were doing. So that got me thinking, why are platform engineers so frustrated with their users? At the beginning of my career, for all my sins, I was a developer. I was rubbish at it. And then I was thinking, am I a toddler? Do they think I'm a toddler? And like any good toddler, I decided I need the answer to this question. I need to figure this out. So I thought back to my first platform role. This was 5 years ago now. And I joined a team as a platform product person. So originally I was supposed to join as just a regular old business analyst who gets to sit in the corner and write some stories. But through a series of people moving on to other opportunities, I got landed with quite a lot more responsibility than I originally thought. So we had a great team. We were trying to migrate a big legacy platform from the on-prem rack space infrastructure that they had to Azure. They wanted to move on to all the new WYSI features, be able to use cloud provisioning, auto scaling, very, very exciting compared to their old system, where every time they wanted to onboard a new customer, it was an insurance company. You wanted to bring on a new insurance provider, broker, it would take them 3 to 6 months. It's a really long time. So one of the main goals of the platform was to move and modernize to the cloud, but also reduce that time. Had a bunch of smart people, we spoke to the users, we gathered all the requirements, security, governance, felt very confident in our estimate that it would take 3 months. 18 months later, we built an exact replica of what they'd already had in the cloud. So we'd used a bunch of cool cloud-native technologies. We'd made it really easy to deploy. We have pipelines. We thought we were all that. We had really impressed the business. They were super happy with us. Everything was really secure. It now took them minutes to onboard a new customer rather than the 3 to 6 months before. We were feeling pretty smug about ourselves until we spoke to the application team. This is what they thought they were getting. You hear cloud, sort of, imagine 4 to 5 years ago, and you think it's going to be perfect. Things will auto scale. Things will deploy whenever they want to. They'll be able to do absolutely anything. No holds barred. They couldn't. They had a Jira system with tickets. It was exactly the same as what they'd had before, except now they had all of the additional overhead and governance of doing it in Azure instead of doing it on-prem, where they had a lot more control and could do a lot more of what they wanted. It was actually worse than that. They had to make changes to scripts manually if they wanted to do anything themselves. Like, people were unhappy all over the place, except the business, I suppose. That was a while ago. I've gone back and spoken to some people I worked with there and was like, so how did you feel as the platform engineers maintaining that system? And they started saying things like this. I don't know if you recognize those. I did. That was my reaction. I was like, oh no, I've done exactly what everyone accused other platforms of. So what I learned is I was asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, why are platform engineers so frustrated with their users, I should have been asking, why are platform engineers still so frustrated with their users? Because I was a product person on that team, and I didn't make their lives any better in the short term or long term. And that's not the first time I've made that mistake, and I'm pretty sure it's not the first time most product people have made that mistake with platforms. They're really hard. It's just finding that the engineers that we're supposed to be serving are not able to add any more value to the business. Other people might be served by them, but the platform isn't giving the engineers and developers what they need out of a platform. So I told you, I'm a product manager by trade now. You better believe I've got some hypotheses as to why this is, and you're coming on that journey with me. Hypothesis number 1, moving from DevOps to platform engineering has created an empathy gap. And this is kind of my main thing that I've been thinking about, because when I was an engineer, right at the beginning of my career, I didn't feel like this about infrastructure. I didn't feel like this about my infrastructure teams. I don't think they felt this way about me, even though I was a toddler. So what changed? And I think it's DevOps. And I think it's empathy. So empathy, I put up the dictionary definition here because it's the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And it's really important when thinking about product management and design thinking as well. It's like a key tenet of how do you think about your users. And it's something that can also very easily be lost. So think back to like the last argument you had with a sibling where they asked you to do something for them that they also already knew how to do themselves. Get me a sandwich, make me a cup of tea. You roll your eyes, you lose a bit of empathy. When your best friend complains about the same thing that they've made a mistake for over and over and over again, and you've told them exactly how to fix it and they haven't, you lose a little bit of empathy. And these are the people you love, let alone colleagues that sit in another team, in another building, that you barely know and speak to. So empathy is really hard. And that's fine. But we used to have it in DevOps. So when you're in DevOps, you've got your operation teams sitting next to your development team, which is great because your feedback loops are really, really small in that scenario. So anything that you do as an application team, you want to build a new feature, you want to build a new functionality, your ops team can get ahead of that. They can get ahead of that really, really easily. Think about it in Scrum, like you plan ahead what you're going to do in a small cycle so they can keep up with you. It's great. But it doesn't scale. It doesn't allow you to serve multiple teams, you end up with quite a lot of sprawl because everyone's doing the same thing in slightly different ways, which means your team can't move very well. Things get expensive. If you've got DevOps teams, I'm sure a lot of you have been through mergers and acquisitions or something where you get multiple different clouds doing the exact same thing, increasing the costs. That cognitive load on each of those teams is actually quite high because you need to understand security, operations, governance, compliance, all of these things that are not simple. So we started to think about how do we grow and how do we scale without it being overwhelming. And that's where platform engineering, I think, came along. So instead of having one DevOps person to one application person, you have one operations person to many application people. That's great. Each of these teams can do whatever they want and rely on your services that are built onto your platform. Brilliant. We all use them shared together. But each of these teams has a gap. And not just one gap, many, many, many gaps. And each of those gaps are exponential and get bigger the more teams you have because you can't focus on that many things at once. And it's natural, right? Like it's really hard to think about that many people's needs at the same time. So to illustrate that, I would like to tell you about Monty. So this is my Monstera. When I was in lockdown, I moved into the most boring flat in the world. It was white walls, it was big glass windows. I had moved from like a fairly nice 1930s house into a new build flat. So I was trying to brighten it up, so I bought Monty. And Monty triggered something in me. I became an absolute plant maniac. So I would sit there and like count his leaves every day and buy specific Monstera fertilizer and get him the prettiest pot I could find. I was like proper crazy plant lady. And it started a bit of an addiction. So I got a few more plants and they were all able to be looked after as well. And I, got some nice pots for those too. And they were all fertilized whenever they needed it. And everyone had their own watering schedule. And then I got a few more plants. And at this point, I wasn't really able to give them quite as much love and care individually as I used to. But they were repotted sort of at a similar time, and they were fed at a similar time. I was reducing the amount of fertilizer that I would buy, but like they were still getting some love. And then it got really bad. And this is the point where I just completely ran out of cares for any of them. Like, you are getting treated exactly the same. You're being watered in the bathtub, whether you like it or not. I'll repot you on one day. That's it. That's all you get. And it's because I didn't have enough capacity for all the empathy for all of those teams at the same time. It's really, really tricky. But the good thing about plants, they do not have legs. They have zero choice as to how I look after them. They have zero choice as to what pots I put them in, what care they get. They can't go anywhere. Developers have legs. So hypothesis 2 is the larger the empathy gap, the lower your platform adoption. And I think this one is important because I would like to highlight something. So a big thing that I see a lot in platforms is a forced usage. So you are part of an organization, you have to use the platform team. But software usage is just logging in. You just do whatever you have to do. And developers, how many of you are developers in the room? Application devs? You're a wily beast. You do whatever you want. So if you give them a platform and say, hey, he has to use it, we'll find workarounds. You'll figure out how to get away with what the intention of the system is. And we don't want that. We want platform adoption, which means you're leveraging that platform and using its benefits as best as you can. So I've got some stories to tell you about that with one of the wiliest developers I know. So I took him to the pub, I sat him down, and I bought him a pint. And I was like, tell me about the times that you have abused the platforms you were forced to use. So we started with the first one, which I'm going to call Big Energy Corp. And they have what I would define as infrastructure-driven development. So they've had this infrastructure team that had been brought up with the organization. So they'd started with what might have been considered a monolith back in the day, like it was really old, sort of 1990s, early 2000s kind of development. And it had grown and the infrastructure had to grow to keep up with it. But they never really changed that infrastructure. And you still had to use that infra and the platform. So instead of making anything changed to it, so changing your application or your microservices or your stack, you would just add to stuff. You wouldn't build anything new. You just keep adding and adding and adding, which made the infrastructure bigger. It made the application architecture bigger and more complicated and harder to change. Onboarding to a team would take like 6 months before you felt confident in using anything. And it just meant that the platform was used as little as possible. So you would do the absolute bare minimum that you could with the platform and try to find other ways of getting in. So you had usage, but you had very, very low adoption. That's our first empathy gap. The second one you told me was an education company. And they had a platform which was absolutely riddled with blackouts. Like, it was constantly going down. They fired their CTO one day, and a week later, their platform and infrastructure went out for 48 hours, maybe more. Only after some investigation did they realize that the AWS master password had been given to the CTO and no one else had access. So instead of relying on that platform that would go down and was not looked after at all, they just built their own. So they had their own AWS account that was paid for by the product team. They had their own infrastructure that they built themselves, and they'd essentially gone to DevOps. This one was the worst of both worlds, by the way. Like, you were paying for a really expensive platform that you were maintaining, and also all of your teams were building their own infrastructure and architecture and platforms. That was mad. And the last one was a neobank. And if any of you have worked with financial institutions and financial regulated industries, you know that there's a lot of compliance and there are a lot of checks that you need to go through. So they had this platform team that had built this automated process so that you could say, I've deployed a thing to production, and now that it has been checked, it gets a green tick, you're all good. And they automated as much of that as they could. However, it was linked to the highest level stories that they had in their backlog. And it was an absolute pain to get any changes through that weren't linked to those stories. So if you had a bug, if you had a hot fix that you needed to do, you couldn't do it. They just shoved them into stories, whether they were related or not. So that audit trail, that compliance log that they were trying to build, meant absolutely nothing because it didn't actually represent what they were deploying into production. So why bother? So they built all of these really like ludicrous workarounds that didn't achieve the results that the platform was trying to get so that they could use it, but not adopt it properly. And it makes it sound like he's an absolute cowboy in these situations, but he's not. Like, he was the kind of person who would love to use a platform if it was built for his needs and did what he needed to do, because he's that kind of developer. Most application developers I know want to be building valuable things for end users. They don't want to be mucking around with infrastructure. They don't want to be messing about with security teams and understanding absolutely everything they need to know about governance or compliance or observability. They want to be building cool apps for users. So my last one, which builds off that, is platforms with low adoption will fail. So before we think about what failure is, what does success look like? And I was a business analyst and product consultant for a long time. And this is the first thing that I would ask. And it was really important to understanding, like, what is the purpose of the platform you're building? And I would get 2 types of answers. The first one filled my heart with absolute dread, and it would be a long list of features. Not ideal. The second one was much more helpful, and you could actually extract from that first type of success these as well. And these were outcomes. What do you want your platform to enable you to do? What does it mean that you can do today or tomorrow that you couldn't do yesterday? And I found that they boiled down to 3 things. It was go cheaper. So this is about limiting reuse. It's about having more predictability. It's about reducing your cloud spend. It's about having operational efficiency. So be cheaper. The next was quicker, go faster. So enable your application teams to do more with what they have and not focus on that rubbish that they don't care about. We're thinking about, we don't want them messing around with pipeline stages. We don't want them having to learn about all of the details of databases. We want them focusing on value. And the last one is do it safer. So how do you make sure that those guardrails are in place for people to do the right thing? Make it really, really easy for them to do the right thing so that you don't have that massive multi-million-pound breach that was in the paper last week. Now, the thing with all of these is it makes no sense without developers using the platform as intended. So it all comes back to that adoption piece. So if your developers aren't using your platform, if they aren't adopting it, then your platform has failed because you will not achieve any of those outcomes, no matter how long your feature list, no matter how fast you get it to market. And I want to bring it back to this just because I think it's so important, and it's something I hear all the time of like the build it and they will come mindset. Without developers adopting your platform, you do not have a successful platform. So we've got 3 hypotheses. Moving from DevOps to platform engineering created an empathy gap. The larger the empathy gap, the lower your platform adoption, and platforms with low adoptions are doomed to fail. Therefore, our conclusion is platforms with a large empathy gap will also fail. Okay, cool, that's fine, Kat, but what do I do about it? Let me tell you. So first is treat application developers as your users. Now, it's really easy to think, actually, my end users are the people who are deriving value from my business. You know, so if you're in insurance, it'll be people buying insurance. If I'm in transport, it'll be whoever's buying tickets. No, you're a platform team. You are serving the application developers. And that might be different. It might be you're serving someone else. You might be serving some sort of security team. You might be serving internal business operations, but focus on those internal users. Because if you don't focus on them, no one's going to use it, and you're not going to get value anyway. So that's point 1. The second is define a North Star metric. So North Star metrics, for those of you who haven't heard of them, they're really big at Amplitude. They've got 1 million documents about it. Google's really big on them too. And they are sort of a shorthand, is what I like to think about it, of why are you doing what you're doing? They're the thing that gives you an indication that you're doing the right thing. And I think that this is the key one to remember, is it condenses down everything your product is really aiming to do above all other functions. And if you're like, think about like YouTube. If you're YouTube, you want people to be clicking a play button so that they see more ads. So if someone clicks a play button, you know you're onto a winner. So you're going to track something like play button. So think about that for your platform and make it related to adoption. Hopefully, if I haven't like shouted about it enough, and if you're not absolutely bored of me telling you to make user adoption important, this, you know, make it about adoption. And once you've made it about adoption, actually, let me tell you a few things that might be in here. So the ones that I've done before, what teams I've worked with, it'll be the YAML file pull requests. That one wasn't so successful, but it was a really good metric to check of whether people were actually using our platform. It might be services that they've requested via your API or your interface or your GUI, whatever you've got to integrate that interface between your application and operations teams. It could be Jira tickets raised to the platform team. If you're fairly early on in your platform journey, actually tickets are still important. Sorry, Ed. They're going to be really valuable in making sure you track them and you can see which ones are people using more. How do I automate that? So make it related to adoption. And why that is important is because you need to understand why customers don't adopt your platform. One big thing that I missed at the beginning of my platform journey was you don't have an infinite market. So platform teams aren't like other products that you might build where you've got 1 million different users that might listen to your music on Spotify. You've got maybe a dozen application teams, 100 if you're lucky. So you're actually limited to your market. So you need to understand why they aren't using it and change what you're doing so that they will. And why they won't, I've seen in 3 ways. So the first is it isn't valuable. So what you're building doesn't actually match what those teams want to use and what they want to do. That's number 1. And that's sort of comes out in other ways, but really it's about you need to find the right abstractions for them to request what they want. So they need to be able to get things at the right level of detail without too much cognitive overhead to do it. And it's also about making it discoverable. If people can't find your platform, they don't know. How you do this will be user interviews. It'll be things like prototyping, shadowing, just find out what people do in their day-to-day already. Next one isn't usable. So if you have made this really complicated YAML-based workflow that people have to make pull requests for, they won't use it. And that's a really obvious one of like, are people actually trying out your software? Have you sat down with them and gone through that process of requesting a service? If you haven't, do that now. That's crazy important. There's a huge demand for consistency and self-service nature in this one. So, I mean, even if it will take people a week after they request something, that is more palatable than them requesting something into a void where they have no idea of how long it's going to be before they get it. They don't want to know, is it going to take me a day? Is it going to take me a month? If it could be anywhere in between, that is not helpful for people because they can't plan. So it's actually better to take a longer time if you're consistent. That's what I found anyway. And the third one is it's neither. It's not valuable and it's not usable. So For that one, go back to first principles, go right back to the beginning, speak to people, speak to developers, speak to application devs, speak to anyone you want to use your platform and find out what do they need and how do they do it today and how would they like it in the future. So this is the sort of mandatory bit. If you've not been paying any attention to what I've been saying for the last half an hour, you're frustrated due to the platform empathy gap. Large empathy gap means low adoption. Bridge that gap and make adoption your North Star metric and fix the reasons why developers don't adopt your platform. I like it. Thank you very much. Woo. Oh. Before I come back in mind, Ed mentioned something about maturity models. So my amazing colleague, Abby Bangser, is part of the CNCF working group for platforms. She's published the platform maturity model, which is incredible. She's put a lot of time and effort into it. So look that up if you are interested in figuring out where your platform is today and how do you improve it in the future. And join that group. She'd love it. She's really nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kat. Ticking many boxes for me. Field of dreams fallacy, build it and they will come. Nonsense. Love it. Also, user research also includes taking a dev to the pub and building on trauma bonding. Trauma bonding unites us all in the tech industry, so please do find out the pain points. And if you do want to experience some trauma bonding, we have another 5-minute break. So please go share some stories. But another huge thank you to Kat. That was absolutely brilliant. Go ahead. What do we need, Paul?
Oh, well, we can either have the last talk and then pizza afterwards. That wasn't what I was going to say. But what I was going to say is, if you wanted to disappear early, I think the downstairs reception where you came in will be locked. So you've all got to stay here over there.
I'm not escaping!
So if you needed to leave, when we all leave, we're going to go out this side and we'll go out. There's another reception entrance down there. So you can get out. You're welcome to stay if you want, but so if you want to get out early, let us know and we'll let you out the other side.
So we'll probably do a show of hands. I imagine people prefer warm pizza. If it's okay with...
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's eat pizza. We'll do a longer break. We'll say 30 minutes, 25 minutes.
What about eating pizza whilst we
Oh, grab pizza, come in. So we'll give 10 minutes to grab pizza, come in, eat pizza while listening to amazing talk. Happy days. Paul is also doing delivery, so if you've got requests, hit him up. Right, everyone go grab pizza. We'll see you back in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not Hawaiian.
Oh.
Happy stuff. Have a break.
Oh, really?
Really good.
That's, I'm trying to search something else.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. I was like, really, she's such a good speaker. Yeah, I've noticed that she gets a lot of references at her talks. She's really good. But I was like, oh, I need to make sure that I shout this out. They put so much time and effort into doing that. Thank you.
Any developers?
I know. Preaching to the That's good. Oh, yeah.
In terms of your usability and value, there is a number of like design-wise, so it's fine. You don't get anybody else.
Lowest barrier to entry.
To be easy to use. That's fine for a second. And that's the only way you've got my console.
Yeah, let me
It was a big flag. I was very lost on the road.
That's totally true, yeah.
I was trying to get back in, and I was trying to get and how's it all going? So they can look at your stuff and go,
Yeah.
So you have to generate something that
Is
is
it the first one you've done?
better than any of their other choices.
Yeah.
And if you can do that,
Then not use it, yeah.
Tom is making his way down.
That is actually
I want to use all of this, but yeah. It's doing the right things consistently,
No,
slowly,
I'll definitely add it.
generating some results, and then the product is progressive. So they've just become a
Right. Right.
As a Gillian's gone. Yeah.
So what you build sort of the connectivity behind the scenes for it. So I know
Personally, I
well, yes, I like Teams.
Yeah.
Your Teams. Yeah.
The other we have stuff and integrate them and that stuff. He did just like no you build this. Yeah, that's fantastic. Without being community space, but our box turned out to be entirely still with French guys. And then that's stuff. Any of the other stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
that's another something. I don't know. It's blamed on the team. The team are getting so mad.
yeah, that's what I've seen a lot of backstage.
Because
They're too smart. They already able to do it themselves.
Choice. They would do that using some of the business. But apart from that, personally, I'm living like just down there.
I mean, there's a reason why I
Bridge,
domain development and
yeah,
things like that really
launched
with such great effects, and it didn't in other areas.
Although he works,
That low friction, get it done.
So I see him for maybe 4
Kind of
hours.
thing, that optimization.
Sometimes when I'm getting up
to
on
pretty
Tuesday,
much everybody else.
7 a.m. and he kicks the door down.
You've given me a job, I'm going to solve it. That's fine. I'm like, do the answer if I can. I'm going to go to first in the afternoon.
Exactly. But it's still carries on party, making coffees. It's what I really love to do. Yeah, exactly. Come back.
Right, that's still bad stuff.
Was there milestones around?
So that's really interesting. That's not something I've seen or heard much of them wanting to bring those skills in house for that career development.
Nice. Cool.
Something you feel like.
Fresher than stuff.
See some of that.
Yeah. If you just what I do, you can get a job stacking shell and say to learn the value of hard work.
Yeah.
And learn a lot about pretending to like UFC. That's my experience when I was
Yeah.
You try and keep it like, all right, build something, use this technology that's the right strategy. Now, something lazy.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, I'll be around.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
around for a bit, or
Yeah,
you'll bring ladies and logos.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
10, 20, 30 pages more valuable.
Right.
But that's how.
The way of the world now.
Yeah. So they're going to talk about
Most demographic people that I've ever worked with.
Oh, right. Who gets that one?
Well, I work in sales teams.
Oh, right. There you go. Fine, yeah.
All right.
It's right up there.
We've just been doing OKRs about that at the minute. We're building some, because we're looking at like what does Kraken's enterprise look like at the minute. So we need to figure out some sales and some marketing. And everyone's getting really nervous because they're like, how do we balance these tensions? How do we keep this, ethical and it's not becomes like a marketer throws a load of shit over events at sales and sells a bunch of stuff that the product can never deliver.
Some wonderful leads for sales go, yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
And have you actually validated?
You can't just write Microsoft on a slide and you can't kind of thing.
Yeah. Nice, but yeah, right. So yeah, absolutely. Developers are not the most difficult, but they will have a review. They know their value, but that message, they know when they're being devalued. So that is not as important as the project that message,
Yeah.
but it's on that list.
You should be aware of it. Well, thank you for the feedback. I'm very happy.
People want to. And strangely, have labeled skills. No one says to you, "Oh, great! I think you're perfectly skilled because you build all these systems over here."
So we've got loads of people
Using this wonderful weird
who have the same way.
there's no value.
Right.
If you can say, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'll do this," whatever the favoured list is, that has some value.
Right.
Really weird because in a job you say, "So what was your last project?" You say, "Well, I don't have this. I created millions of pounds of things that do this."
Yeah.
You judge on something and talk about
Similar things.
really never. Which is how many buzzwords.
But no.
Yeah, right. I think that's the challenge is who does that CV sync, who are the recruiters versus what's the job you're doing. So yeah, they're just scanning for Kubernetes, or they're just scanning for language, yeah. And
As
then
a
like,
first part.
right, exactly. So it means that you have to, you're optimizing for that.
You have to at least claim, and maybe they found out later. I've done my fair share before that. You actually go around looking at CVs and seriously to try and find out.
Yes.
You have done. And you make a validation of that one. You validate the skill level. People want to learn.
Yeah.
Have to collect the baggage in this strange way. So you don't get to use this subject.
Yeah.
No points at all.
No, unique isn't valuable like that. They want to be able to, if you're a big org, really, the best situation is you pick someone up and you drop them in and they build exactly what they built before if it was highly successful, which doesn't, you can't just write that on a CV. Usually if it's some weird domain specific thing, which is what we find is like actually a platform you can't just take it off the shelf.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can't just, wow. But even that's configurable, right? Like we can go to like Heroku. Right, like if Heroku was the answer, nothing else would exist. You could build it just with that very highly specific set of components that are there, and it just spins up and it's ready to go. Everyone would be doing it.
Some people are very disappointed.
Yeah.
They are,
And
yeah, but I think
from the developers perspective,
Right, okay.
it was the administration, it's all like the administrative stuff. We can't use this as flexible, it's standardized, do all the more infrastructure things that are. But the developers use things, mostly great. So it's a strange combination.
Yeah. I've seen some people very successfully build their entire business on Heroku, but they never scale past about 30 people. Right? Like you can actually live within the constraints of that boundary, but when you were at 200, 500, 1,000 people, you have all of these weird compliance edge cases, or these old systems that you can't get rid of because you build it on mainframe and no one can figure out what it doesn't involve, or all of those things that just don't fit anymore. But that's
So yeah,
maybe.
we're in the business trying to sell icing on top of that icing on top of that icing. Which I like.
I think it's low.
To talk about.
Yeah.
Right,
Get some keys.
A lot of what you're saying is
Oh, how's that? Well, that's good.
Cool. I'm going to go and set some of there. All right. Yeah. Okay. You're probably not going to get on.
Of course.
Where are you here? Or? Yeah. So what did she do? I'm going to go to the loo in there, but you have to let me back in.
I don't know. I don't know how legal that is, but you're so on brand. I know. It's quite. Do I is it like a green screen now?
Yes. I completely forgot about it, brand.
Oh, you forgot about what? Yeah. It's gone.
But I think about lots of people and everything.
Set it up so
Quite
you should
quiet.
get your notes coming out. It looks a bit small though.
Yeah, I'm
But
going
hopefully you'll be
to.
able to.
You can. No, it's not letting me do that. Okay.
No, I think it's
On the right.
fixed. I think
Right.
it's.
Oh
yeah.
Where's the mouse
Just
gone? I can't see the mouse.
Oh yeah, you need a. There it is.
Okay.
Well, that's better, isn't it?
Cool. So we'll have them on both sides. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last time you talk.
Quite a while ago. A few months. Quite a while, a long while. The last time I did it in person, probably about 4 years. About 4 years. No, maybe, yeah, pre-pandemic. we talked about mental health and being a CTO. So, lead to dev.
Oh, I had to. I used to get like, I always got really mad about people saying it's a socio-technical problem, and I was like, ah.
What
I've become what I was
directed? What my directors are saying it, they're fucking funny. I believe you've got me saying this.
It just is the new agile, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's such a buzzy thing, isn't it?
It's all about complex adaptive systems.
People
I
and
did literally,
computers, okay?
I literally had to take out a thing where I just talked about like complexity and thinking about like directional change rather than end state. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Well, I've been
Just
using
an
like
exciting
Evan
something
stuff,
different,
and it's very
Yeah.
fun just flashing up and Evan being like, who knows what this means.
Yeah.
Loads of people are like,
I remember that.
Yeah.
Any feedback?
That was brilliant.
Yeah, I got a recording. I'm interrupting. I just have a question. Yeah, it said there was going to be. It's.
it's always the fact for me, okay, like,
I thought it would just be like.
complex stuff when it's reading. I mean, when the tech was real simple.
Right, okay. So that's fine. I have to say.
It doesn't matter regular. Always was. All good?
Yeah, good. We've got there and here.
So I'm going to stay here because I don't think I'll be able to see properly.
So, shall I stay here?
You can stay there. We're just going to pass
Yeah.
the mic.
And the only thing I'd say is,
That means we've got weapons.
Okay, we didn't do the
Slide by slide.
Stragglers, come on in. We love you. It's all good. How many people have we still got out there? 10? 5? 5, 10? We'll give them like 30 seconds and then this room will self-destruct. That room, sorry, yes. We're the victims of our own success. As is often the case with the best platforms.
Well, I was on the wait list. I literally had I was reading.
Right, we're going to jump on into it. So hopefully everyone is ready for our third and final talk of the evening. Hopefully you're refueled, have drinks in hand, and ready to get back underway.